Well, hello there. So as you can see, we are currently located at Belmont Park, and in front of a 101-year-old national landmark called Giant Dipper. And tonight's review will be a little different, as in order to celebrate America's 250th birthday, and to make up the lost time and missing out on a reviewing last year, I'll be reviewing this coaster on Independence Day. And this will be since the San Diego's classic roller coaster had opened back in 1925 on Independence Day too. So, so in order for this celebration, let's start the review. Now, for those unaware, Belmont Park as a whole would open on July 4th, 1925, or Independence Day 1925. Back then, the park would hold two main attractions with Giant Dipper and a large indoor pool. Plus, the park would hold multiple shop buildings as well. As the differences were both, there were slight ones with the trains being more simplistic compared to today on Giant Dipper, while the pool held for the record for the largest saltwater pool during the opening, in which both would be changed to more modern designs later down in the line. As the pool exchanging from saltwater to freshwater in 1940. However, unlike the state's other old park, Santa Cruz Bridge Boardwalk, conflict arose within the 1960s into 70s, with much of the park being in disrepair with a lack of fire and earthquake protection, including Giant Dipper, the wooded coaster. Many demanded for the ride to be removed by the city. However, because of the land that was privately owned by the original owner, that means that the ride would have been protected, even if the ride wasn't up to safety standards. But for some second miracle, many organizations like the American Coaster Enthusiasts saved the Coaster Committee and the San Diego Seaside Company would try and save the coaster, in which from 1990 to current day, the San Diego Coaster Company would cater to watching and helping Giant Dipper specifically. This revival would also introduce the new Morgan trains instead of the original bench type of trains with a buzz bar, and color schemes that the ride would be known for within modern day. Although the color schemes would change a few times according to photo evidence. It's also worth noting that the coaster would be one of two coasters created by the duo Fredrick Church and Frank Pryor still operating, along with one of three in general built by Fredrick Church that's still operating. While I could go more in depth with a historical context, I would rather dedicate more in-depth coaster history in San Diego for, a different time. Now, in terms of this review specifically, I like to mention that this is a coaster review with an extended explanation of Belmont Park, simply because the majority of Belmont Park is significant towards this one ride, that being the everlasting Giant Dipper. For reference, a quarter of the park that is moderately sized coaster, where the rest of the park is a small shopping center, smaller and compact rides that are mostly insignificant, and other compact activities like a pool area, laser tag, and a small zip line and a ropes course. Personally, we were all really intrigued by the coaster based on the insignificance of the other activities for me, plus the pay-per-ride system that definitely makes us choosy if we want to do. But more about pricing later. For now, it's important to demonstrate that directions for the park. Now, unlike other parks within the state, it's quite hidden from the interstates nearby, as much of the eastern direction for where the park is, such as roads, are obstructed by trees and other structures nearby, like SeaWorld San Diego or docking areas within Mission Bay. While it is a nice surprise driving in for the first time seeing the coaster up to the final minute, it isn't the best for approaching the park for the first time. So in terms of where to head, the primary direction to head is driving on Mission Bay Drive to the park, which can be accessed with the exits to SeaWorld San Diego from the interstate, those being the I-8 with the Mission Bay Drive or SeaWorld Drive from the I-5. Additional directions to the main road is driving south from Enneagram Street to Mission Bay Drive. Those are the essential roads that bring you to the front of the park like it's intended. The other roads that sometimes someone may take is Mission Boulevard, north from the park, which is closer to the coast compared to the interstates. Thankfully, both roads would lead to a drive encountering Giant Dipper first, which is the park's lone coaster. So even if the roads are obstructed by stuff, you at least won't miss the park in a casual way. Now for parking, the park is extremely easy to park since it is considered free parking in traditional parking lots. Additionally, 3 nearby parking lots exist within a few hundred feet of the park, that being heading towards Venture Place that's across the street from Mission Bay, or 2 southern parking lots located on Mission Boulevard in the south of the park itself. The main difficulty, though, is parking could be the potential crowds that may want to visit either Belmont or the nearby beach, which overflood these parking lots real quickly. But if you can tolerate that, then this may be the most accessible and quickest park within California for parking and getting into the park. And honestly, who knows? For the final aspect of the park itself, I guess we'll talk about how the park is laid out. As mentioned before, the park is quite tiny, as the length of the park is as long as the coaster, and a few stores, with the width of the sides of 2 narrow buildings, or a more technical reference is 716 feet by 505 feet, with most of the park having no space for any additional investment for building or rides, unless they would want to use this piece of small parking lot for a small flat ride, a tiny kids coaster like a Wacky Worm, a SBF Visa coaster, or the most narrow and compact coaster you can think of in its footprint, like a 25-meter Intamin Zaxbyt. The point is that this park is super tiny, which results in extremely easy travel to locations throughout the park in terms of distance. Along with distance, as long as you're not visiting any smaller building intentionally and don't know where to travel to, then each section will be extremely easy to locate, especially the outdoor rides. For example, Giant Dipper owner has a major appearance that cannot be really missed within the park. Plus, its adjacency on the path could give clues of the couple of spots of where the tickets and entrance of the ride is. And then other rides around these are compact enough to find entrances as well. Really, the main spots that are harder to locate are smaller indoor attractions on the western side of the park based on them being used for enclosed buildings that don't have much advertising. Last thing before we get to the main attractions of the seaside park is to mention that these are a couple of quick service restaurants that are around there inside the park, and a couple of full restaurants very close by, with the closest being Kojak's across the Ventura Place Street. Personally, I'd rather eat at these larger restaurants that have more complete meals, but all these eateries around have pretty decent to good and quality food, and are all at ridiculous prices for the meals. Alright, so in terms of a pre-ride experience, there are a couple things that are required in order to ride. Since we've already discussed and heavily implied Belmont Dipper's location, I guess I'll talk about the financing. So in terms of pricing, the ride is quite flexible in terms of options. And what I mean is that there are 3 ways to pay for Giant Dipper. The first would be the ticketing system, where a certain amount of tickets are used, in which each ticket is worth $1. From experience, 8 tickets would be used for Giant Dipper per 1 ride, making this the most expensive ride here in terms of tickets. Then there's the second option, would be to ride and play combo, where for 1 day, the holder for this pass could spend around $55 to $65 for each unlimited rides, unlimited activities, and 2 zip lines. And to be fair, this deal usually happens unless you can somewhat go to Belmont Park on your birthday, and they'll allow you to get the wristband for free if it's directly on your birthday. I actually got this experience where I actually went to Belmont Park on my birthday, and I got the wristband, and we got 17 rides on Giant Dipper on one evening, which was pretty sweet, I'm not gonna lie. Now, in terms of overall value, I would recommend the pay-per-ride option if you're willing to pay less than $50 for rides, or if you're just doing like 1, 2, or maybe 3 rides. But tickets are most useful if you want a couple rides on there. but if you want multiple laps, you can do the ride and play pass if you prefer. Now, in terms of how the ride handles lines, the coaster operates with one train of 24 passengers. Now, typically, this type of capacity could be weaker due to the result of slower rides or coasters. It feels that at most parks. However, unlike my experiences with rides like Electric Eel, Twister 3, New Revolution, Accelerator, Boomerang, Viper, Pony Express, or even Sears Sidewinder, the visitors aren't spending much time at Belmont Park. So line for Giant Dipper is usually a wait of between 2 cycles or 10 minutes, or 2 cycles for the average wait times for if there's a sizable line, where 2 to 3 minutes are taken to load, while other times is used for the ride course. Now, really, this varies based on what specific days the visitors choose to go and what certain times of the day. For example, the evening really didn't have much of a line. In fact, I had even a lot of Zen rides on Giant Dipper on my aforementioned birthday. But, most of the time, casual weekends or weekdays don't really vary much outside of a wait or for a train or none. However, there are likely exclusions in terms of short days, likely days that are busier for the beach. Holidays, and even special events could cause lines to be longer than expected. Now, currently, I haven't seen what the approximate wait for the more populated days are, but I did visit on the 100th anniversary of Giant Dipper, and I didn't find the line to be that bad. Really, it was just around, I don't know, like a 10-minute wait and all. And so, really, if you're worried about having to wait a long time, just don't. This is just more of a casual type of experience, as I stated before. Now it's time for how the station and train is configured. Loading will have a first-come, first-served type of style of loading, where riders can choose any unoccupied space for what row you can choose. Now, in terms of where to sit, it's better to sit closer to the ends of the trains for more instances of force throughout the layout. The middles of the trains are, while not forceless, they don't have much force either. As far as personal row selection, I do prefer to lay out towards the back in comparison for the strongest lateral moments and more slight airtime pops within the back. While the front can be smoother and have their own unique moments, I would honestly say the back is a much more of a violent ride, I'll say. This also can help with how you can sit on a wheel seat, and that can actually emphasize on kind of filling in with much more of the pacing because of the bumpiness of the ride. I actually think the jackhammering is actually one of my favorite parts of the roller coaster and a benefit towards the ride, because if you are not sitting in a wheel seat, you probably won't get the sensation of positives and air quotes. These aren't really proper positives, but they do happen to be within the valleys, which is a nice welcome for the ride. But I do know people could have a problem because this could be the roughest roller coaster in Southern California, after all. That's not saying much, because I know most roller coasters here are at least smooth, and if it's rough, it is tolerable. But this is probably the worst case scenario, where it has some brutal jackhammering, with maybe the exceptions could be X2 or Viper if you can't handle the transitions. But as for the loading procedure, people will pretty much scan their tickets at the gate by a ride operator. They'll also place their belongings within a cubby, as no loose articles can ride. There's also these standing marks on the ground, which I don't think that it's really used that often. It's in fact, I know recently I don't think we really stood on those tiles, and as we waited at the gate for the one train to return back to the station. Now, in terms of the final part about the loading tile is weird, is there's the presence of no air gates. And that's probably one of the reasons why, I don't know, the roller coaster doesn't have much It doesn't have people waiting there. All of this is more speculative. And to be fair, this is pretty weird, and it's an interesting novelty that I don't really see that much with roller coasters that often. These there could be fun. I really remember mainly with traveling roller coasters, and then the other one is Desert Storm. But outside of those, I don't really know. Um, it's cool to keep a piece of history where we could hold the trust not to walk on the track. Plus, we don't have to hear anyone say, "Stay off the air gates." Now, in terms of the trains, the ride holds 6 of 4 seats. So that's 6 cars and 4 seats. With these, you are placed into your own seat, divider, and groove. Plus, have a shared lap bar that locks into a singular position of the car. Now, for these trains, I do like how the train is set up with a proper and comfortable seating position. It's feeling pretty exposed vertically due to having a lap bar that doesn't necessarily contact you. At the very least, for the front row or back row, there's potential for airtime to ease restraint. Along with this, I do prefer that position that the rider is in a specific spot rather than making a fiberglass couch, as the ride isn't going to be that smoothest. As I'll be discussing those examples within future reviews. That said, I will note that these trains are a bit cramped horizontally since they are a bit narrow in arm space. But personally, I don't have trouble resting my arms somewhere. In fact, the crampedness I think kind of enhances the laterals, as you have something that you can notice the impacts more. Additionally, the trains aren't padded at all, so somebody could be more impacted by the roughness compared to some other wooden coasters like Apocalypse at Magic Mountain, Twister 38 Elitch Gardens, Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm, Wild One at Six Flags America, Roar at Six Flags America, Racer 75, and Grizzly at King's Dominion. There's all of my wooden coasters, and all of those don't have at least some sort of padding. Although personally I didn't have a problem with the roughness, really, as I stated before. But anyways, I'll now start the review for the ride experience. First off, the ride starts by lowering the wooden planks that prevents the coaster from rolling forwards during loading, and therefore starts and turns left into some straight track that leads into a dark enclosed tunnel that really leads you to the lift hill. Now, in terms of smoothness, this pre-lift is quite smooth, being the smoothest part of the ride. This is a good thing, as what's in the tunnel skips to the time up here to skip the spoiler consists of multiple turns left and right within the pitch darkness, although these moments do not consist of any force. Now, for the pre-lift is quite entertaining due to having some sense of speed because of an enclosed tunnel, which is another neat quirk about the ride that I like. While you could wish for more aspects to be added, like a black light theming or some sensory effects, these don't really need to be added for a ride like this, and that the tunnel, like it is currently, is perfect for what the tunnel serves, that being positioning the riders towards the lift hill, as said before. Next comes the lift hill, and this gives an interesting and distinct anti-rollback sound. In which this is probably my favorite, as it actually sounds quite different from the standard lift hill mechanism, and it has this, like, I don't know, interesting rhythm that you really don't hear much else. Instead of, like, just a normal click, 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 it's more so a kind of sounds like a bell, I would say, ringing. Additionally, the views on the coaster are quite neat since you're on the right side that gives the view of the park and ocean. While there is better views on coasters due to more variety and emphasis on your surrounding, it's still extremely good as the second best view on a Mission Bay roller coaster, which is very beautiful after all. Then, the thrilling portion starts with a twisting first drop to the right. This here gives the ride's most fluid forces with pretty good laterals. At worst, the laterals are just alright with force within the bottom 3/4 of the drop sequence, but at best, these are notable and sustained moments for the state. However, I will say that the valleys for this drop isn't the smoothest, since the moment is quite shaky during the valley. Again, the roughness comes into for toleration, but at best this can be a entertaining moment of the coaster that shows both this is a wooden coaster and at the very least gives something over nothing. I was like, this doesn't really remind me about the positives aspect that I was referring to before because of the turn, but it's still a much more entertaining moment in comparison. Next follows an ascent that in the front and back row gives the weakest airtime pop I've experienced with lap room, or at the very least the moment that kind of throws you out of your seat. The front feels a bit more conventional, where it's more formal airtime compared to the back that more so lurches the rider forward into their restraint due to the steepness of the drop and the exposed seating, and really a sensation that you usually don't get on coasters these days. Then comes a second half of the double down, broken up with the turn, where everyone would come across the turn that holds a weird lateral kink to the right, and a quick, although a less jarring and more fluid moment of solid laterals pushing the riders towards the left. Interestingly, this is one of many moments where there's a lot of unconventional and weird forces present. Not so much the directional terminology like airtime or laterals, but more so the weird durations or placements of these forces that I'll further prove during this review. Next follows the valley with a moderate positives with jackhammering, where depending on how further back you are on or are you on a wheel seat, this will be intensified for you. This then follows a turnaround with giving a small pop of airtime in the very front row, whereas everyone else gets a forceful laterals and that gets stronger the further back you are in the train. After that, we have our next valley, probably the roughest moment on the ride with the worst jackhammering. A bit more on the uncomfortable side, sadly, although I'll say that I've done worse. Then follows a large camelback that gives a good lateral burst in the front and a very weak pop in the back. That then follows with the next valley, giving the hold some milder jackhammering. Then comes my favorite part of the roller coaster, along with the most WTF part in my opinion. This third, proper hill, firstly gives the most noticeable, slightly more sustained airtime pop in the front. That's much more remarkable compared to the other pops on the ride. It's even better in the back though, where at first a good airtime pop occurs. That's pretty cool. And then immediately after, the ride just yanks the riders to the side simultaneously with the laterals while turning during the drop. This drop actually is an element that I really like to the pairing of forces, and that these aren't really weak compared to the rest of the forces on the roller coaster. It also helps where the Morgan trains have a singular position lap bar with cramped seat trains, as you feel the impact of the airtime more from the limited contact of the lap bar. While the cramped trains give a better emphasis on the laterals, in a way this kind of feels a bit unhinged. Although I have a few things to talk about when we get to the conclusion, or overall. Anyways, the coaster then descends into another shaky valley, which follows with a turnaround here after the speed is left off. Then is the next hill where only a brief airtime occurs in the front row versus the back, which doesn't. Then the coaster cruises through the next valleys and hills, and sadly the roughness was too tame enough to give a kick of forces that we would expect in the valleys, along with the too long of a hill to give much really airtime. Then comes another crazy part as the final turn in the ascent with constant intense laterals, jolts, which again feels much more intense in the back or a wheel seat. The final ascent into the brake run gives the strongest floater of the ride, which was pretty powerful pop into the brakes. The train afterward goes through some unique skid brakes, which ends the coaster that surprisingly lived for this long. Now, with the coaster, it was surprisingly enjoyable for a pay-per-ride roller coaster close home. I like how there was a variety of forces presented within most of the ride. The laterals were pretty cool to experience, along with the airtime being a neat bonus for the ride. Additionally, I find the roughness adds to the interest of the ride, since at the very least it adds character to the coaster. While not becoming uncomfortable from my experiences, uh, while there is better wooden coasters, even ones that are close to Belmont Dipper's age, I will say that this might be my favorite pay-per-ride roller coaster within the San Diego area. That said, I will have a few criticisms for the coaster. For one, the ride isn't really paced best. A lot of the ride pretty much has inconsistent pacing since not every piece of track is utilized for forces. Whereas the pretty intense forces and quirks are definitely notable, a lot of the time the coaster doesn't have that great of profiling to really keep the speed consistent, as most hills usually stall in some sort of way. This is most blatant on the airtime hills that have very few of that, along with the more prevalent with the lack of positives in the valleys. While in its current state it's perfectly fine, I do have a preference in terms of coasters where they feel pretty frequent in terms of forces or changing between one element to the next, which leads me to my ranking of the ride. Now, prior to my rides in 2026, I didn't really jam with the coaster much to really care. Prior to this, I thought Arctic Rescue was comparably better due to the fluidness of that coaster, but discovering the intense forces in this recent trip made it much more interesting in comparison. That said, it will not rank as high as some other forceful roller coasters like Electric Eel, which I think is more of a fluid motion of forces while holding aggressive forces. That said, I think Giant Dipper has more interesting forces and elements compared to Batman to Ride at Six Flags Mad Mountain, which has much more substance I remember in comparison. So therefore, this ranks 21st out of 84. Now, before we sign off, I'd like to say that I appreciate having these coasters still around. Even if the ride experience isn't the strongest, still appreciate seeing a coaster last over 100 years, though, as that's an accomplishment within itself. This would be most 12 coasters to reach 100 years, and the 11th to do so while retaining its original layout. It's even more cool to see one nearby home for such accessible pricing. So I will say that I'm at least glad that Giant Dipper is around. But anyways, since my upload schedule is, whack, I really don't know when the next review will be out. So I'll just say, happy 205th birthday for the United States.
What was that for? Dark day. Dark science lab. It's better than dark terminal. Man, it's just someone's opinion. Analysts say that dark science terminal is better than dark science laboratory. Fine. I'll do a video on the dark science terminal.
Majority of the day, we've decided to get a ride on that, and since it was one of the icons of the park, I've decided, you know what, let's make it my first RNC. San Diego. Anyways, we're on to SeaWorld San Diego's Crown of Patheticness. And to end off
Alright,
the
so in terms of if the Submarine Quest compares pretty well with Pressure's submarine ride, not so much. As you see,